What's up, y'all? Today we're talking about slack pull and wedge for deadlift. Okay?
What is a slack pull? What is a wedge? Why do we need to do it? Deadlift is unique because there is no eccentric portion of the lift. We are going to talk today about creating tension in that bottom position so that you can make that concentric portion a little bit easier because you don't have that eccentric portion to help load your muscles, use that stretch reflex, all of that kind of stuff.
Wedge slack pull gets thrown around a lot. There's a lot of, I think, it's almost like too much information and it's hard to know what exactly we should be doing. So a way to simplify that is just creating tension, okay, prior to initiating the lift, creating tension. All right, so how are we doing that? What is it? Am I creating tension in my body? Am I creating tension in the bar? It's both. So
how are we gonna do that?
How the fuck, like, okay, cool words. Now apply it. So we're gonna talk about 3 things that we feel are integral to creating this tension. Okay, number 1 is going to be brace. Number 2 is hinge. Number 3 is the slack pull. Okay, notice we didn't say the word wedge. That's okay. This is going to cover everything. So it all is in the setup. So she approaches the bar, and the first thing, like we talked about, is the brace. All right, we have the video out on that. We know how to do that. We're going to get our air. We're gonna brace our core, stiffen our core, and it's gonna remain in this position. Her head is gonna remain in this position. She's not gonna be looking up when she descends to the bar. She's not gonna overly tuck her chin, okay? Brace accomplished, okay? Step 2 is hinge. Pause. So notice it's the sitting back of the hips. It's the hips that are doing the moving. Pause right there. Her back is in the same position. She's looking at the floor, okay? She's not looking up. And again, it's going to differ per person, but this is the fundamentals. It's hinging down, loading the glutes and the hams, and having just enough knee bend that your individual anatomy will allow to get the press through the floor. A good reference is when you hinge, your hands should come straight down to the bar.
You're reaching for the bar at the top, brace, hinge.
Her hands are already where they need to be, okay? So now, we got our brace, we got our hinge.
All right, let's talk about slack pull. So when you're descending to the bar, immediately once your hands touch the bar, you're going to start pulling the slack out of the bar. Pulling the slack does not necessarily mean you are pulling with your back, you're pulling with your upper body, you are pushing through the floor with your legs. So there's 2 things going on here. We're pushing down through the floor with our legs while pulling up on the bar to create tension between us and the bar. So there's 2 forces. There's pushing through the floor and pulling up on the bar. Those 2 need to match. Let's watch Ernie. So when you hear that initial click and he is pushing through the floor with his legs, keeping his lats and T-spine nice and tight, pulling a little bit against the bar by engaging his lats, engaging his T-spine, and then pushing through the floor with his legs. Those opposing forces match, we have a beautiful deadlift straight off the floor. You don't want the bar to go forward, you don't want it to come back, you want it to come straight up. So this applies to both sumo and conventional.
Okay, and this is what it's gonna look like for sumo. Mads is gonna demonstrate sumo. We're gonna break this down into 2 main approaches for each pulling style. So Mads is gonna first demonstrate the hip shoe and the wedge, all right? So the fundamentals are there. Brace, hinge, okay? And so her slack pull, her torso is a little bit more bent over, okay? And she's gonna do her hip shoot. So what that is pressing through the floor. Her hips are going to rise, and that's gonna really load her glutes and hams more, okay? And from here, the shoulder position stays the same, and she is bringing her hips to the bar, okay? So something to clarify. A lot of people say sit back. Not correct, because then we're gonna lose our center of gravity. It looks like she's sitting down because her hips are coming lower, but the cue we're using is hips to bar. She's pressing her knees forward and out, and she's getting her hips to the bar, okay? And in that, subsequently, her head is gonna come up. She's gonna generate more tension in her back and in her arms, and now she's in that position to initiate the lift. So one more time. So that's the hip shoot wedge. Now she's gonna show a more a different way to pull slack, and it's more subtle in the sense that there's less hip movement. So okay, so in this way of doing it, we don't need the hip shoot to create the tension in our hips and our glutes, because she's doing it on the descent. So come back up real quick, and just like we just showed earlier, she's doing it herself. She's loading her hams and her glutes on the way down. Her hips are loaded. So now all she needs to do is extend her T-spine as she is still using that hips to bar cue. Fundamentally, it's the same. It just looks different because she's taking care of loading her hips on her own in the descent. Execution is different, end result is the same. It works differently for different people. Figure out what works for you.
So those principles apply both to sumo and to conventional. William is going to demonstrate conventional. So we'll start with the hip shoot that we talked about before. So he's going to descend down to the bar, start to pull the slack, set his hips now, and then drive. So as he pulls the slack, his hips come up, and then he's going to load them as he wedges, and then press from there. You don't have to do it this way. It works for some people. Try both, see what works best for you. This is also not the only two ways to do it. Now we'll demonstrate what he has moved to more recently. T-spine, slack pull. So as he comes down, he's already loading his glutes, quads, hams. He's loaded here. Now all he has to do is grab the bar, engage his T-spine, boom. And that's his slack pull. Yeah, how do you know if you're performing a proper slack pull and wedge? In that bottom position, you are vigorously putting yourself into position, creating tension in the bar. The bar, if it's light enough, will start to float before you even go to pull. So William will demonstrate. As he slack pulls and wedges, the bar has already left the ground because this is only 135. So if there's enough weight on the bar is going to begin to bend. You'll hear the clank. You'll see a little bit of movement. All right, that's a slack pull. It's creating tension. Another thing that you can do to know if you're doing it right is to simply do pause deadlifts. Okay, and your pause is going to be immediately after you initiate the slack pull. So a way I was doing it for a while was my pause was simply this, and I would pause here, and then I would initiate the lift. Okay, so it's going to train the position, it's going to train the movement, and you're going to get immediate feedback if you're doing it right or wrong, because if you're doing it wrong, you're going to feel it in your fucking back, which you shouldn't. In video, your lifts, okay? The number one thing to fall back on, yes, it felt good. Watch the video. Things to look for. We have our shoulders over the bar. As you initiate the movement, you want the bar to be the first thing to move. You want the bar to start to come off the floor before the hips shoot up, before anything else. You want the bar to be leaving the ground at the same time as everything else moving.
Not.
If you start to lift and your hips come up first, and then you start to lift the bar, your hips are not in the right position. You need to find your proper hip positioning.
Another one is just not taking the slack out. So we'll see people do like a passive slack pull, but then they go and they'll jerk it, all right? And it's going to cause you to lose your position. It's going to cause the lift to not feel as good. That is our take on slack pull and wedge. Create the tension, video your shit, reach out to people who you know can help you if you need it. R.A.T lifts.
R.A.T lifts.